Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some more of the Great War, and we are on to week 156. I am recording this on a day that I usually don't. I'm recording this on a Thursday. Usually I record my videos Saturday, Sunday. Record 4 videos each day, so 8 videos in total, so that I can also eventually build up to having a one weekend every 3-4 months where I don't have to do any work. And I can just relax. But I'm going somewhere this weekend. So, or well, the weekend that I'm recording this. By the time this gets uploaded, it will be like the following weekend. The weekend, that doesn't matter. The weekend that I'm recording, that I would normally record, I'm gonna be busy and also tired. So it doesn't really affect anything. I just am oversharing. Anyways, July days in Petrograd, blood on the Nevsky Prospect. Before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love if you joined the Discord and followed me over at Twitch. Okay, let's dive in.
Russia's Kerensky offensive enters its third week this week, and
We're already on the third week of the Kerensky offensive. Whoa, time flies.
of War Alexander Kerensky, who it's named after, has been at the front supporting his troops. But when the cat is away, the mice will play. And this week sees the July days at home. Chaos in the streets of Petrograd. I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to the Great War. Last week, that Russian army steamroller continued its advance in the southeast. The British sent a women's auxiliary corps to France. Lawrence of Arabia planned new attacks in the Middle East. A British battleship exploded at sea, and mustard gas made its appearance on the battlefield. Here's what followed. The Russian steamroller began to run out of steam. After 2 weeks of gains, enemy resistance begins to stiffen in Galicia on the 15th.
They really did not make much progress. Oof.
And indeed, Russian forces begin to withdraw the following day. It was not until the 19th, though, that the big German counterattack really began. But it began with a vengeance. 9 German and 2 Austro-Hungarian divisions broke through the Russian lines on a 20-kilometer front and took 6,000 prisoners. And as the week drew to a close, the breach in the Russian lines grew larger. You know something? From just the last 2 weeks, Russia had a new hero in the person of General Lav Kornilov, as it was his units that had advanced the furthest.
1918, huh? But feeling someone's a victim of the October Revolution. And its fallout.
He had actually been one of the officers captured at Przemysl when it fell 2 years ago. But he'd made a daring escape. He had served well last year under General Alexei Brusilov during the summer offensive. And since then, until this offensive, had been a corps commander in charge of the Petrograd district. And there was big trouble.
He's got a bushy mustache. Impressive.
There this week. By this time, the unclean sewers had created a real health hazard, not to mention an overwhelming smell. Dysentery and cholera broke out, and warnings were posted everywhere not to eat fresh fruits and vegetables unless they had been washed in sterilized water. Food shortages continued.
Well, you're supposed to wash your fucking fruits and veggies anyways. You're taking them out of the ground. Well, wash them.
And there had been a resurgence of big anti-war demonstrations, many encouraged by Vladimir Lenin, Leon Trotsky, and their Bolsheviks. On July 16th, on the Nevsky Prospect, the main street of the city, came rifle and machine gun fire, and there were trucks full of armed men roaming the streets. By the evening, the trams had stopped running, and armed soldiers were confiscating private cars, including the Belgian ambassador's Rolls-Royce. The streets were swarming with people, and rioting and
Belgian ambassador doesn't need a Rolls Royce.
Looting broke out. The U.S. Embassy estimated that around 70,000 armed workers and soldiers ran the city that night. Many people were killed or wounded in the streets. Much of the soldiers were dissident units of the Petrograd garrison, who objected to being sent to the front, though that order had actually been given just to get them out of the capital. Bessie Beatty, California journalist, wrote the next day the Bolsheviks were taking over the city. Indeed, the Bolshevik-led protesters numbered a lot more that day than the day before. And they were backed by several thousand politically agitated and armed sailors who'd arrived from Kronstadt Naval Base, where they had had an uprising of their own in May. Again on the Nevsky, machine guns were fired into the crowds, killing hundreds of civilians. Torrential rains that evening and all day the 18th temporarily ended the hostilities, and on the 19th, soldiers called in to put down the violence began to arrive from Dvinsk. They were a different breed from the troops in the city and were seasoned and disciplined. Around 30 of Lenin's men were arrested. The soldiers entered the Bolshevik stronghold at Kshestinsk Mansion to find 70 brand new machine guns and documents that showed that the Bolsheviks were getting funding from the German General Staff. This was political dynamite, and a statement came out about it in the evening papers, which turned the tide against the Bolsheviks, and the July days, as they would be known, came to an end. These days had made Kerensky furious that the government had not taken control of the situation in his absence, and he determined that its replacement, which was formed July 20th, would have dictatorial powers in order to bring the army back to discipline.
That's not going to go over well.
The soldiers of the Petrograd garrison that had revolted were to be disbanded and sent to the front. The Kronstadt sailors to be disarmed and sent back to their base. And Petrograd awoke that day to find that the power of the Bolsheviks had been broken for the time being. Warrants were issued for the arrest of Lenin, Trotsky, and the other Bolshevik leaders. Trotsky was caught, but Lenin escaped to safety in Helsinki. Photographer Donald Thompson, present at the July days, had this to say: "That Lenin who escaped, and his confederate Trotsky, who was a hash slinger in New York
The hash-slinging slasher?
a few months ago, have done more to ruin Russia than any two men I know of in history." It wasn't just Russian demonstrators who were turning against the war, though. On the 19th, the German Reichstag, that had been recalled in order to vote more money for prosecuting the war, demanded that when peace came, it would be a peace without annexations. A peace resolution, July 19th, was passed 212 to 126, and it urged the government to work for peace. New Chancellor Michaelis, the mouthpiece of the Army General Staff, said Germany would do no such thing. "I do not consider that a body like the Reichstag is a fit one to decide about peace and war on its own initiative during..."
One thing I've never understood about like military figures, and especially right now, these German military generals, is what are they gaining from perpetuating this war at this point? Right? Like, there's no... I refuse to believe that these people can be so absolutely stupid and oblivious to everything else happening around them and to their country that they cannot realize that they don't have the means to continue this war for that much longer. So I don't like, and what do they get out of, like, I don't... This isn't the warlords time period here, right? These German generals aren't warlords. They aren't going to be governors and feudal lords of these occupied territories after the war if the Entente were to, for some reason, allow them to keep certain parts of foreign land that doesn't belong to Germany. Even if that were the case, those German generals would not be the rulers of their own private domains. I don't... They get nothing. They're I don't get it. Like, if this were like a war in the medieval times or something like that, or even just honestly just a couple centuries previous, I could understand it, because these German generals would have probably more incentive and be given like land and things like that to rule, which would increase their own personal political power or whatever. But they aren't going to get that here, and perpetuating the war while the country starves is not going to make you more popular to the people. I can't understand it.
During the war, he said dismissively. And another government was giving the okay for more war this week. It had to do with the coming British offensive in Flanders. The preliminary artillery barrage for that was already in action, though there was still the big question of whether British Commander Sir Douglas Haig was trying anything different from what they'd been trying the past 3 years. Prime Minister David Lloyd George and new Minister of Munitions Winston Churchill thought not.
Never heard of that last
French
guy.
Generals Foch and Pétain thought not. Haig, though, felt justified by the enormity of his resources. But the futility of the other Western Front offensives gave good food to skeptics. In Haig's favor, the weather was still unusually dry for the region and season, though that would likely not continue. So he was in a hurry to get going. He had decided, which his senior generals weren't too thrilled about, that his youngest army commander, 47-year-old Hugh Gough, would carry out the main part of the offensive. Gough was bold and eager, sure, and he came from the cavalry like Haig, and Haig still believed in the big breakthrough that would be exploited by cavalry. Thing is, Gough wasn't much of an executive, and here in Flanders, the incredible amount of men and resources to be organized took more managerial skills than it did dash and bravado. That was not good for Gough. On July 7th and 13th, he had asked for more time, the second time saying he needed 5 more days. Haig gave him 3, moving the scheduled start date from July 25th to 28th. On the 17th, fog turned up to further complicate things, so the date was pushed back to the 31st. Haig was very well aware that rain would turn the battlefield into an enormous swamp, and he was anxious. But you know, he still had not been given the green light by the British War Policy Committee for attacking, only planning. But finally, on July 20th, they told him he was free to proceed with the attack. There was a group of people making plans for a future government happening as well. All month long, negotiations between Southern Slav representatives had been going on Corfu about the possibility of creating a new country. They assume that Austria-Hungary will disintegrate and Serbia will regain its independence.
On
July
correct.
20th, the Pact of Corfu planned a post-war union of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes as a parliamentary monarchy under the Serbian royal family. Minority rights would be guaranteed. There would be universal suffrage and an elected assembly. There was, though, a bunch of conflict between Serbs who wanted Belgrade to run the show and Croats who wanted a Yugoslavia rather than a Greater Serbia. That conflict remained unresolved. And here are a few notes to end the week. On July 16th, there was a mutiny among the French troops on the Salonika front. Their demand was for the right to go home on leave. 300 got new leave, 90 were arrested. On the 15th, Arthur Zimmermann, author of the infamous Zimmermann telegram earlier this year, resigned. And on the 17th, the British Royal House officially changed its name from Saxe-Coburg and Gotha to Windsor. This was because of popular anti-German sentiment, and the royal family did not want to advertise its German ancestry. And the week ends with the
See, they pulled a sneaky on you.
Russians retreating in the east, plans for a Yugoslavia in the south, and the British offensive in the west being delayed, even as the barrage is in force, and chaos in Petrograd with Lenin forced to flee. So that's the last we'll see of Lenin, I suppose. I mean, taking money and weaponry from an enemy power in time of war and using those resources against your own people, that is treason any way you look at it, right?
Yeah.
And that's not something you just get a do-over for. Although, Russia is in such chaos, uncertainty, and turmoil that it's anybody's guess what's going to happen next. Maybe we will see that guy again.
Nah, I don't think we will. I think he's going to fade into obscurity. And that was July days in Petrograd. Blood on the Nevsky Prospect. The Great War, week 156. Got nothing to add here at the end. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.